Anastasia Muzheny was born in 1998 in the city of Pyatigorsk in Russia's Stavropol Krai. But from a young age, home was never a peaceful place. Her parents fought constantly, filling the house with tension and noise. So whenever she could, Anastasia stayed away, spending long stretches elsewhere just to breathe and feel some kind of calm. By the time she turned 16, the years of fighting had finally worn everything down, and her parents' marriage came to an end. With her home life constantly shifting and unstable, Anastasia found comfort in someone her own age, a girl named Elena Popova, who would soon become her closest friend. They lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, and before long people described them as inseparable. Their bond felt less like friendship and more like sisterhood. They even chose the same path academically, enrolling in an art school together, where both consistently earned top grades. Art came naturally to them, and they excelled enough that they later enrolled in separate art colleges, still chasing the same dream. That sisterly bond only grew deeper over time. Elena's parents seemed to accept Anastasia as part of the family. She stayed over so often that she blended right into their daily routine, helping with chores, cooking meals alongside Elena's mother, doing homework at their table, even walking the family dog on her own. Elena's mother appeared to care for Anastasia almost as much as she did for her own daughter. In February 2017, Anastasia began working at a clothing boutique in Pyatigorsk, owned by a friend. Those who met her described her as cheerful, warm, and easy to like. Very few people had anything negative to say. She worked there for 3 months, from morning until evening, every day, and earned a reputation as diligent and hardworking. Eventually, she left the boutique, and not long after, she left Pyatigorsk entirely. She headed to Moscow, hoping for better opportunities, while Elena stayed behind to work as a saleswoman. But the promise of the capital never quite materialized. The only job Anastasia could find was at a strip club, for a painfully low salary. Disillusioned and disappointed, she began planning her return home. Those plans brought Anastasia and Elena back into close contact once again, and soon they were dreaming together like they always had. This time, the plan was to study design and once more try to build a future around art. In August 2017, Elena went on vacation with friends to a music festival in Krasnaya Polyana, a mountain resort near Sochi. After the festival ended, she reached out to Anastasia and invited her to join her for the remainder of the trip along the Black Sea coast. Anastasia didn't hesitate. She accepted immediately. On August 23, 2017, Anastasia arrived by plane in Sochi, where Elena was waiting. The two wanted something different, something more authentic than typical tourism, so they decided to hitchhike along the coast, travel light, and camp on the beaches whenever night fell. Then, on August 27th, they reached Novo-Mikhailovsky, a small village just outside the resort city of Tuapse in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. Nearby was a rocky, secluded beach that few people ever visited, and after seeing it, they decided this was the place. This was where they would set up their tent and spend the night. The two had very little with them, just a tent, a couple of backpacks, and snorkeling goggles they used to collect shells from the seafloor. Money was tight, so tight that they resorted to shoplifting from a nearby grocery store just to have something to eat for the night. On August 28th, while swimming along the beach, they crossed paths with two local men, 31-year-old Dmitry Kozachenko and 27-year-old Elman Korbanov. The men were traveling along the coast in a motorboat and stopped to talk. Dmitry mentioned his brother owned a hookah bar nearby, and before long, the four agreed to meet there later that evening. According to Dmitry and Elman, both men had sex with Anastasia that night. What followed was a heated argument, intense enough that the two men eventually left the bar. Then, the next day. At around 3 p.m. on August 29th, a local beachgoer walking along a secluded stretch of shoreline noticed something unusual. a collapsed, crumpled tent lying alone on the sand. Almost immediately, he sensed something was wrong. Beneath the fabric, the clear outline of a human body was visible. When he lifted the tent, his worst fears were confirmed. He saw the body, dropped the tent instantly, and called the police. Inside was the body of a young woman, lying on her left side. Her head was covered, her lower body exposed. Her face, thighs, stomach, and knees were covered in bruises and abrasions. Her nail beds were broken, a clear sign that she had fought back. And yet, despite the apparent violence of the attack, there was very little blood on the surrounding sand. Most of it was found inside the tent and in her mouth. Nearby, police discovered a broken chain and deep ligature marks around her neck. A severe fracture was also found at the base of her skull. Together, investigators concluded that she had been strangled and suffered a fatal head injury. Then, something even more unsettling. Close to the scene, police found a handwritten note. It read, "Good luck, bro. I'm not fucking him if that's what you thought. You can calm your foggy head. I got drunk and laughed, but when I saw your reaction, I didn't know what to do. I thought you'd come, but there was no reaction." A message left behind, raising far more questions than answers. Another disturbing detail soon emerged. A blood-stained phone charger was found at the scene, with strands of hair tangled around it. The autopsy began on August 30th, and at first the estimated time of death was frustratingly broad. Anastasia could have been killed up to 48 hours earlier. The medical examiner did make one crucial discovery. Semen was found in her vagina. That meant one thing: police needed to identify who it belonged to. It didn't take long for investigators to confirm the victim's identity as Anastasia. From there, they began tracing her final movements, speaking to anyone she may have interacted with in Tuapse. That search quickly led them back to Dmitry Kozachenko and Elman Kurbanov. Elman's DNA was collected and compared to the semen found during the autopsy, and it was a match. Despite this, investigators did not take swabs from Anastasia's mouth, nor did they collect DNA from the other objects found at the crime scene, a decision that would later raise serious questions. Police were also told about Elena and the argument the two women had reportedly been involved in, and because Elena was nowhere to be found in the area, she became the police's primary suspect. By that time, Elena had already returned to Piatigorsk. Local officers were sent to her home to question her. Elena told police that Anastasia was still angry after their argument and refused to share the tent that night, demanding that Elena leave. According to her, she packed up her belongings, left behind the handwritten note the police later found, and walked away from the beach. At first glance, her story seemed to hold up. CCTV footage from a nearby cafe showed Elena leaving the beach area at 2:10 a.m. She could be seen flagging down a taxi that already had 3 passengers inside. One of them was a man named Vladimir Cherkasov. During the drive, Elena began talking with the other passengers in the taxi. As the conversation unfolded, Elena mentioned Anastasia, explaining what had happened to them earlier that night. Eventually, Elena was dropped off along the federal highway. From there, she continued her journey back to Piatigorsk by hitchhiking. First, she caught a ride in a truck heading towards Krasnodar, then used a ride-sharing service for the rest of the trip, arriving back in Piatigorsk at around 10 a.m. on August 29th. Not long after, police searched Elena's family home. During the search, they seized a pair of pants she had worn on the journey, along with a bedsheet. Both items showed what was described as stains of a brownish color. Closer examination revealed the stains were small, just 3 tiny spots of dried blood, each roughly the size of a match head, measuring between 2 and 5 millimeters. DNA testing soon confirmed the truth. The blood found on the pants belonged to Anastasia. Forensic technicians also detected a large amount of sweat on the fabric, and when it was tested, it matched Elena. With that discovery, the Piatigorsk police moved quickly. Elena was arrested and almost immediately extradited to Krasnodar, where she was placed in pre-trial detention, accused of murdering her best friend. According to the investigative committee in Krasnodar, the killing happened sometime between 1 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. on August 29th. Investigators claimed that Elena, still furious over their argument and consumed by jealousy over Anastasia's sexual encounter with Elman, acted in the heat of the moment. They alleged that Elena struck Anastasia on the head with an unknown blunt object, causing the fatal fracture at the base of her skull. Then she supposedly kicked her several times, inflicting the bruises and abrasions found on her body.
But there was a familiar problem. Just like Dmitri, Emmanuel also appeared on television multiple times. And just like Dmitri, his story kept changing. The polygraph tests he took didn't help his credibility either. They suggested he was only partially truthful. Even Elena herself said there were others nearby that night. As she was leaving the beach, she claimed she passed a young man and a young woman sitting by a bonfire, roughly 20 meters from the tent. Police never attempted to identify them. They were never interviewed, never located, never mentioned again. Locals also began speaking to the media about someone else entirely. According to residents of Tuapse, there was a strange man who had been living on that beach for years. Near the crime scene stood a makeshift wooden hut, little more than torn sheets nailed together. A woman from the area described the man who lived there as a madman, someone who disappeared and reappeared without warning, and who would stare at women walking along the shore with what she called the crazed gaze of a maniac. Police dismissed the story outright. No search was conducted, and no effort was made to find him. Then, 2 more men came forward. Local residents Vladimir Komarachev and Ivan Berbitsky claimed they were the last people to see Anastasia and Elena alive. They testified that sometime around 1 a.m. or later, they saw 2 intoxicated women matching Anastasia and Elena's descriptions, arguing as they walked toward the beach. And behind them, they said, was a man of what they described as southern appearance. There was only one problem. They couldn't be certain of the exact date they'd seen this. Still, by this point, the defense's arguments were clearly gaining traction. When the case was first brought before the Tuapse District Court in January 2018, the judge took a close look and then rejected it outright. He cited numerous errors and sent the case back to the prosecution, ordering a full reinvestigation. Then, something completely unexpected happened. On April 1, 2019, a masked man appeared on the Russian TV program Na Samom Dele, and he claimed he was the real killer. He identified himself as 21-year-old Vladimir Cherkasov, one of the passengers in the taxi that picked Elena up the night she left the beach. According to Cherkasov, after being dropped off at home, he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd heard in the taxi, about a girl alone in a tent on the beach. So he decided to go there. He said he approached the tent and called out Anastasia's name. Inside, she panicked. A stranger was calling her name in the middle of the night on a secluded beach. Cherkasov claimed Anastasia pulled out her phone and said out loud that someone was trying to assault her. That's when he said everything spiraled. Panicking, he began shaking the tent violently. Then he picked up a rock from the ground and struck her through the fabric. He kicked at the tent and finally strangled her with the chain. Here is a portion of Cherkasov's confession in his own words. "I was walking along the beach and found this tent. I tried calling out to make sure it was really the tent where Anastasia was. A girl answered and started asking me what I wanted from her. She was calling someone on the phone, saying someone was trying to rape her. She was screaming really loudly, which alarmed me because the beach wasn't exactly deserted. I was afraid there might be repercussions, that she was filming me and would report me to the police. I started shaking the tent.
I wanted her to come out so we could talk. I picked up a rock and hit her through the fabric with it. She continued screaming, but since she was under the fallen tent, she couldn't do anything else. I wasn't trying to hit her specifically in the head. I instinctively threw the rock into the sea and ran from there. Honestly, I don't know what came over me then. A confession, shocking, detailed, and disturbing. But the question remained, was it the truth, or just another lie in a case already drowning in them? What made Cherkasov's confession even more convincing was the timing. His appearance on the program marked the first time he had been back in Russia in nearly a year and a half. Not long after the murder, Cherkasov had abruptly left the country altogether. He moved to Uruguay, where he took a job working at a pizzeria in Montevideo, owned by a Russian immigrant. Unlike the other witnesses who had gone on television and told shifting versions of their stories, Cherkasov's polygraph results were strikingly different. For the most part, he passed the test with flying colors. And when it was over, Cherkasov reached up and removed his mask. For the first time, viewers were looking directly at the face of the man many believe was the real killer. Giving a detailed and seemingly sincere confession to murder live on national television for a crime that had occurred just days before he fled the country for nearly 2 years was impossible to ignore. Na samom dele was filmed and broadcast from Moscow, and as the episode aired, Moscow police were already on their way. Moments after Cherkasov walked backstage, they were waiting for him. He was placed under arrest on the spot. Officers prepared a full report, forwarded the materials to the investigative committee in Krasnodar, informed their counterparts in Tuapse, and began making arrangements for Cherkasov's extradition. What they didn't expect was the response. Police in Tuapse flatly refused to act. They said they would not open a case, not even a preliminary file. Cherkasov's confession, they claimed, was nothing more than a prank, a stunt meant to shock viewers on live television, and they made their position clear. They would continue prosecuting Alina. According to them, Cherkasov's confession was unreliable for several reasons. First, they pointed out that the 2 witnesses whose testimony potentially supported Alina's innocence, Vladimir Komarachev and Ivan Berbitsky, were friends of Cherkasov. Another friend speculated that Cherkasov might have used the confession as a way to get back into Russia, claiming he had run out of money in Uruguay and couldn't afford a ticket, believing the TV show would pay him to appear. There was another issue, they said. Aside from Elena, every other passenger in the taxi that night initially claimed there was no additional person, only 2 other passengers. That would mean Cherkasov couldn't have been there at all. But after the confession aired, those same passengers came forward and admitted the truth. They said they had been covering for Cherkasov. Cherkasov had refused to report to the military recruitment office for conscription, and they didn't want him to be detained. So, when police questioned them earlier, they pretended he hadn't been with them. Even with this revised testimony, it changed nothing. Tuapse police refused to entertain the idea that Cherkasov could have been involved in the murder. In their view, the case was already solved. There was no reason to question anyone else. That decision left Moscow police with no real options. They were forced to release a man who had just confessed to murder live on national television in front of the entire country. By the time Elena's trial finally approached, few people felt hopeful. Local authorities appeared determined to dismiss anything that might raise doubts about her guilt. Preparing for the trial, Elena's sister looked into the court's history, and what she found was deeply unsettling. The Tuapse District Court hadn't issued a single acquittal in more than 10 years. Nationwide, only 0.26% of criminal cases in Russia ended with a verdict of not guilty. Then came another blow. Against Alina's wishes, the court replaced her defense attorney, appointing a new one just 1 week before the trial was set to begin. Requests to delay the proceedings to give him time to review the evidence were denied. And despite the fact that much of Russia believed Elena's innocence, with the exception of Anastasia's parents, it seemed unlikely that public opinion would change the outcome. The defense laid everything on the table, every inconsistency, every missed lead, every unanswered question. The prosecution, meanwhile, did little to address them. Instead, they clung to their original theory, a theory built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, with very little to support it. One of the few witnesses who wasn't part of the investigation itself was Anastasia's father. He told the court that he had conducted his own inquiry and that it proved Elena's guilt beyond any doubt. He claimed he had consulted a forensic expert who told him the blow that fractured his daughter's skull, though fatal, was actually quite weak, and that a young woman of Elena's size could easily have delivered it. He also made his personal feelings clear. He admitted he never liked Elena and had always disapproved of his daughter's friendship with her. In fact, he went even further than the prosecution. While prosecutors argued the killing was a sudden act committed in the heat of the moment, Anastasia's father accused Elena of acting with premeditation. He claimed she had lured Anastasia to Tuapse with the express intention of killing her. To support this, he told the court that he traveled to Tuapse himself to recreate the route Elena allegedly took from the tent to the CCTV camera. Using a stopwatch, he completed the walk in 11 minutes and 29 seconds, arguing that this proved Elena had more than enough time. The defense immediately pushed back. They pointed out that his experiment left out nearly every relevant variable. He knew the route in advance. He wasn't carrying bags or belongings. He did the walk in daylight, not in total darkness. And most importantly, he hadn't just committed a violent murder, staged a crime scene, cleaned himself up, written a note, and